more and more players are finally getting their hands on Ivar the Boneless in Rise of Kingdoms. So today we need to talk about it because I've gotten a handful of people asking if they should invest in Ivar the Boneless for open field PvP by just leaving him at 5511, which using Ivar in the open field is something I talked about in depth in my infantry guide that I recently posted here on the channel. And maybe that video is why people are asking me if they should invest in him as an open field commander at 5511. I mean, after all, I did say this. The reason that I say this for last is because you should not get Ivar unless you're a rally leader. Okay, but I can understand the confusion because I also said this. I would not recommend getting Ivar if you're not a rally commander. Okay, so pick one of the other lineups if that is you. So watching the infantry guide, I can easily understand why people might come to the conclusion that they should invest in Ivar as an open field. Oh my god. Okay, now in all seriousness, I did actually mention a couple of open field pairings with Ivar in that video that performed pretty well. So why did I say not to invest in him at 5511? That seems like a steal. That seems like a really cheap investment for an open field commander. But today we have 4 reasons why you should not invest in Ivar the Boneless for open field use, even at a budget build of 5511. I know it's tempting, but hear me out. But first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now before we jump in, of course, as you guys know, I'm a sponsored partner created with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you want more Rise of Kingdoms content, consider subscribing down below and drop a thumbs up while you're down there. It really helps out the channel. We are so close to 95,000, which is kind of insane. All right, folks, let's jump right in here and do a little bit of a deep dive when it comes to Ivar for open field use. Okay, there's a lot of hype around this commander because he is a 3 target smite damage AoE commander dealing 2500, and you got a little bit of a rage engine here, and rage engines are always exciting. Now in the case of Ivar, this rage engine is not something that you're really going to notice very much unless you pair him with Sun Tzu Prime, and also you probably need to have a talented Horn of Fury. Okay, so even though he has a rage engine, what really matters is it enough to actually reduce the number of turns it takes to cast your active skill? Okay, so his active skill is very exciting. His second skill is also exciting because a lot of times what we saw, at least last year, was the fact that a lot of rally commanders and garrison commanders as well, a lot of the stats would only work in the rally or garrison, right? In this case, Ivar gets his stats all the time, and you'll notice that this is the exact same second skill as our boy William Wallace, right? 10% health, 30% attack, 20% march speed. Okay, so we're looking pretty good on the first 2 skills, but then the third and fourth skill do nothing unless you're rallying. Now the expertise is actually pretty nice. You take 10% less normal damage, so that is your white numbers, that is every single turn. That's also 10% less smite and combo damage, which is quite good as well. And then you further reduce that when you're under 50%, but you're only going to have this if you have an expertise Ragnar. Okay, so you're not going to expertise Ragnar for open field use. That's just not going to happen. Everyone knows this. No one said to do that. Of course you're not going to do that, but the question is 5511, right? Because 5511, this is kind of like the mystical, like free-to-play dream, right? Like this is the free-to-play dream would be to have like 90% of a commander's value in those first 2 skills, so that way you just spend 190 sculptures and it's almost as good as having an expertise commander, right? And so a lot of times when a commander like Ivar comes out, people get excited and they're asking, can you use him at 5511? And you might think that that is the case, and I mean technically you can, right? You can use him at 5511, but the problem is the cost to do so. And 190 sculptures doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about free-to-play players and low spenders, that is quite a lot. Okay, so why should you not get him as 5511, even though he's going to perform probably about as good as William Wallace? He'll probably perform a little bit better than CJ, right? He's going to perform in that area, and frankly, the longer the battle goes on, the more you're going to see value out of somebody like William Wallace. But the quicker the battle, the more in and out you are, the more value you're going to get out of Ivar, right? I mean, that's just how that goes. That's why AoE is so good in the game, and why the active skill on William Wallace is kind of like an Achilles heel, unfortunately. But hi, Tiger. Okay, Tiger's coming to say hi. She's a little bit bored today. Tiger said you guys have to like and subscribe to the video. Those are her rules, not mine. I don't know what to tell you, but every time I'm filming now, she comes to say hi. All right, so let's jump into the first reason you should not get him for open field, and that is his talent trees. He is an infantry, conquering, and defense commander, which means he's just not going to be primary, right? I mean, in a world where we have so many strong commanders with the smite talent tree, and even the attack tree is not that bad for smite damage, like you're just not going to run Ivar as primary. And when you're looking as a free-to-play player or a low spender, you're looking at commanders that, you know, if they're only ever going to be a secondary, then they need to be really freaking good. They need to be so insanely good as a secondary that it justifies their cost, right? And Ivar just doesn't fit that bill. Unfortunately, only half of his skills work in the open fields, and those two skills are solid, but they're not good enough to make him a must-have commander for the open field, right? So if you do get him, he is doomed to be a secondary always. Okay, the only time he might be primary is in rallies, and even then I think Scipio Emilianus is going to be the primary, right? I mean, what are we talking about? He's got the smite tree. You're going to deal a lot of damage there. All right, so that's the first thing we have to mention, is that he is already, not only is he limited with the number of skills that he can use in the open field, he's also limited in his placement in your army, right? You can't use him as a primary even going forward. It's very unlikely that he's going to be a primary for open field use. Okay, let's talk about the second thing here. When we compare him to other open field infantry commanders like Bai Chi, like Liu Che, like William Wallace, like Sun Tzu Prime, well, clearly he's not on the same level as Bai Chi, Liu Che, or Sun Tzu, right? Like those are just built for the field. They dominate there. So really what we're comparing him to is William Wallace, Chook, or maybe some people are comparing him to Hector, although Hector's damage output really isn't quite there. I feel like Hector is basically a cavalry commander. That's where he fits the best at this point in time, but you're comparing to those commanders, and then you're also comparing to the opportunity cost of just running Ragnar Scipio, right? And I know a lot of people don't like Ragnar Scipio right now, but like we're still talking a 2800 active skill that hits 3 targets. We're still talking about the 2000 damage factor with debuff on Scipio. The health debuff is AoE as opposed to other commanders that have single target debuffs these days, which is kind of crazy, right? So if we're talking about using Ivar, we have to ask ourselves, okay, if you're doing that, you're obviously comparing him to the smite commanders primarily. Does he bring your second or third army up to a level that is much better than what's already there? And I think you can make the argument that he might be a little bit better than the William Wallace or the CJ, depending on your accessories, your equipment, and a lot of other factors, right? Like I said earlier, the longer the battle goes on, the better you're going to do with something like William Wallace. But here's the thing, right? Chook is technically a KVK2 commander, right? And he's also really old. Like he's been in the game for a really long time. And for some reason, they have not put a museum relic in the game for CJ. Like it is so insane how I actually think they just skipped him. Like they just specifically skipped CJ. They even just put in Cyrus, which is another KVK2 commander who used to be KVK3 and beyond, but now he's KVK2. Same thing with Takeda, right? They put Takeda in KVK2 and he's got a relic, and we don't see a relic on Chook. Now we should also see a relic for Bertrand, honestly. Like he should be in here as well. But my point is, you know, with CJ, there's a chance that he gets a museum relic like really any day now. Like they're late actually giving him a museum relic, so like they could shadow drop this whenever. And if that relic is meaningful, right? Like if we look at some of the more recent relics that they put into the game, like we look at Nebu, for example, right? Nebu has 15% attack and 10% normal damage taken reduction. If you see this on somebody like CJ, or even better, they give him 10% march speed and like 15% health or something, right? Like that could really move the needle. And in that case, well, now your investment in Ivar is kind of wasted. It would have been better to just go for the CJ. And we can also make a similar argument for William Wallace. Now he's not going to get any museum relic anytime soon, but when you look at the performance in the field of a 5511 Ivar versus William Wallace, you're probably not going to notice much of a difference there unless you are running 3 armies and Wallace is somewhere else. It's just the thing about Wallace, right, is he wasn't great when he came out, but they've kind of built smite damage in the direction of like making sure that William Wallace is relevant, right? So like, for example, his single target damage is not good, and then they put Sun Tzu in the game with a brand new mechanic we've never seen before that turns this into AoE. So then it's like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. So when he came out, that was not something you could like reliably predict, right? You couldn't just say, oh yeah, William Wallace, eventually he's going to get a commander pairing that's going to make him AoE. Like we've never seen that before. And then on top of that, the impact of Lion of the North was average back in the day, but now that we've got Sun Tzu Prime, like a 40% increase to 3000 damage factor is something, right? Like that is meaningfully higher than when William Wallace came out. When you compare all of those things together, it's like, okay, even if you make the argument that Ivar is as good as William Wallace, at least William Wallace is doing other things, and at least William Wallace is someone you could use as a primary commander, even though he doesn't shine typically as a primary commander. I know you can use him there, I know some people like that, but my point is, if you're going to invest in Ivar, you would expect him to be like clearly better, right? At least a little bit better all the time at 5511, because remember, you're missing this, right? Like this is why in my video I said the only people that should get Ivar are rally leaders, because they're going to expertise him, so they're going to get this, so they're going to have him be performing a little better in the open field anyway. This is not nothing, right? In fact, this is like part of the third skill of William Wallace, same thing, 10% less normal damage, right? So even if you could make the case that Ivar is a little bit better than Shook and maybe about the same as William Wallace, and in some instances he might be better, like where battles are shorter, and in other instances he might be worse where battles are longer, he just doesn't move the needle enough, right? So then you're thinking, okay, well, like what we're talking about here is a 5511 versus expertise, right? We're talking about an expertise William Wallace, talking about an expertise Shook. Clearly the value per sculpture is higher for Ivar, right? So if you're going to invest in anybody, like you're only wasting 190 sculptures here compared to full expertise with these other commanders. And while that might be true, you have to remember that if he's just barely in the conversation now when it comes to open field, again, rally's a different story. He's clearly in the conversation for rally, but for open field, he's barely just making in that conversation there, more so with 3 infantry armors, I suppose, than 2. You're really investing 190 sculptures for a commander that is guaranteed almost to be obsolete before the end of the year, right? Because we know that there's going to be a leadership release most likely this summer. It's probably going to be in June or July of this year, right? We know that probably archers will be around April, and that should put the leadership and range release sometime in June or July, right? Like we have no idea what they're going to do with that. That one's kind of the wild card. And even though, you know, realistically the next leadership is probably going to be Garrison, right? I mean really, what are we talking about? Like we just got Hector, and before that we had Philip, like not that long before. It was maybe what, like a year ago. Okay, so like typically they don't release a ton of open field leadership commanders. They could change that, like they could change their tune moving forward, and maybe, you know, that's this year. But I mean, if we're being realistic, there's at least a small chance that the leadership commander comes out could be as good or better than Ivar as a secondary to any troop type, which includes infantry, which would make the 190 sculpture investment here invalid. So no matter how you cut it with Ivar, the 190 sculpture investment is good bang for your buck, but it's super short-lived, right? So at the earliest we would see him benched would be this summer, and the latest we would see him benched would be probably at the end of the year or the beginning of next year, which is like 9 to 12 months away, right? So you're committing to just losing those 190 sculptures faster than if you invested in anything else, right? Or if you just save them, just save those sculptures. You don't need to invest in something right now. And I think that's one of the hardest behaviors that players have to learn, is to just be patient, right? Just bank these things, just save them. I mean, guys, I'm saving up conversion stones and transmutation stones and crystals for the next formations, which should be, the first one should ideally be coming next month in March, right? I even have this on my arch set just because I don't want to convert it to pincer yet for fear of wasting that, right? And a lot of people look at that and say, oh, well, you're being overly cautious. And it's like, yeah, but I've also played the game for so long. I know how these things work. I know what you have to do in order to have an account that has meaningful progress in the long run, not just in the short run, right? And so when you are thinking about commander investments, you have to think long term. You have to think at least a year, if not longer, right? So even though we're only talking about 190 sculptures here, he has an expiration date that's planted on his forehead, and he's the most likely to be power crept out of the open field meta for infantry with the next coming releases, right? So that's why, you know, especially free-to-play players and low spenders, they get excited for the 5511, but they're the ones that should be saving their sculptures the most because they get the fewest, right? And so it's kind of a trap. You don't want to find yourself in that trap, which is why I said in my video, do not invest in him unless you're a rally leader. So I wanted to make this video just to clarify sort of what my opinion is of Ivar. I think, yes, you can use him in the open field if you've got the equipment to support him and you already have him as a rally leader. You probably can fit him in somewhere right now. If if you try other things, like you try your William Wallace, you find that he's better, you try your Chook, you find he's better, fine, that's great, do that, right? But as 5511, he's not somebody that I would be looking to invest in Rise of Kingdoms for open field. So hopefully this video clears it up. If you guys have any other questions about Ivar, let me know in the comments section below. While you're down there, consider dropping a thumbs up on the video. It really does help out the channel a ton. And while you're down there, consider subscribing to the channel. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.